My wife visited the same man on the first Tuesday of every month for 18 years. She signed the visitor ledger with her maiden name. On our 25th wedding anniversary, she stayed with him for 5 hours and 40 minutes. Beside her signature, a staff member wrote, "Private family visit. Do not call husband." The man was Thomas Bell. I knew him. 22 years earlier, Thomas had worked under me at the municipal water plant in Des Moines, Iowa. I accused him of falsifying a safety inspection. He lost his job, his reputation, and nearly every friend he had at the plant. My wife, Marjorie, told me he had moved away. The ledger proved he had been living 40 minutes from our house. My name is Douglas Mercer. I was 71 when I found those records, retired after 37 years in water treatment operations. The rehabilitation center where Thomas lived had closed, and I was helping the County Historical Society identify records before they were scanned or destroyed. Most ledgers contained nothing but names and dates. Then I saw Marjorie's handwriting. Not once. Hundreds of times. The visits began in 2006, shortly after Thomas suffered stroke and entered rehabilitation. They continued every month for exactly 18 years, ending only when the center closed in 2024. First Tuesday. Every month. Always under Marjorie Lyle. She brought something almost every time. Paperback. 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 For years, I had watched cheap paperbacks appear on our kitchen counter. Marjorie said she bought them at library sales and donated them after reading them. I never asked where they went. Then I found another signature. Samuel Price. My former union representative. The man who urged me to report Thomas. Samuel visited once, 2 weeks after Thomas lost his job. Beside his name, he wrote, "He still won't tell Douglas." Thomas had been hiding something. Samuel knew. Marjorie knew. And for 18 years, my wife had been carrying books to the man I helped destroy. The ledger was genuine. Pauline Webb, the center's former records clerk, confirmed the procedures. Visitors signed in. Staff recorded gifts. Unusually long visits required a note. She remembered Marjorie. "Quiet lady," Pauline said. "Always brought mystery novels." Did she say how she knew Thomas? She called herself family. She wasn't. Pauline looked uncomfortable. Maybe she meant something else. I showed her the anniversary entry. "Why does this say not to call me?" That came from Thomas's care plan. Why? He had an emergency contact who wasn't to be notified during certain visits. Who? You. I stared at her. I was never his emergency contact. Your name was on the intake form. Pauline found a photocopy. Emergency contact. Douglas Mercer. Relationship. Former supervisor. Do not call unless resident cannot speak. Thomas had listed me years after losing his job because of my accusation. The monthly visits began after his stroke, but Pauline checked older intake notes and found something worse. Marjorie had already been visiting him occasionally for almost 4 years. The stroke had not started the relationship. It had only made the visits regular. I searched the margins of the ledger. Marjorie brought biographies, westerns, detective novels. On Thomas's birthday, she brought a paperback copy of The Old Man and the Sea. Every year. I knew that book. Thomas kept a copy in his locker at the plant. After the safety incident, I found it on the floor and tossed it into lost property. At home, I checked our shelves. There were 6 copies, different covers. Same title. When I asked Marjorie about Thomas that evening, she did not deny anything. She looked at the ledger page and said, "I wonder when somebody would show you." Not if. When. Then she said, "Before you decide what those visits meant, find the original inspection card." Thomas was 12 years younger than me and one of the best maintenance trainees I ever supervised. In August of 2001, a chlorine ventilation fan failed during the night shift. The backup started late. 2 employees were treated for minor exposure. The safety file showed Thomas had inspected the backup fan 6 hours earlier. His initials appeared beside. Operational test completed. But the fan had not been tested. The belt was cracked, and the starter relay stuck. Thomas denied completing the inspection. I confronted him in front of the maintenance crew. "Did you sign this without testing the fan?" "No. Those are your initials." "I know." "Then explain them." He hesitated. That hesitation convinced me. I reported the form. Thomas was suspended and later pressured to resign. The union challenged the discipline, but Samuel told me the document was too strong. 6 months later, I was promoted operations manager, praised for handling the incident quickly. Marjorie said I had judged Thomas too fast. I told her, machines lie less than people. Records lie less than memory. She never forgot that sentence. I found my old copy of the safety file in the garage. The inspection card carried Thomas's initials, the time 10:15, and my signature on the supervisor line. Beside the time was a tiny blue arrow. I had always assumed it was a clerk's correction. Then I found a carbon copy clipped behind the maintenance schedule. Same inspection number, same equipment, but the time field was blank. Beside Thomas's initials, someone had written, "Per diem complete after restart. DM, Douglas Mercer." Me, I took both forms to Marjorie. She looked at them without surprise. "You had this carbon copy?" "Yes." "For how long?" "Since 2 weeks after Thomas resigned." "Where did you get it?" "Samuel's union file." I remembered Samuel coming to our house while I was working. Marjorie told me he had brought benefit paperwork. He had actually brought evidence. Samuel believed the final card had been completed after the ventilation failure. He did not know who added the time. Marjorie asked him to reopen Thomas's grievance. He refused because Thomas had admitted signing the form before the test. "So he did falsify it." I said, "Not the way you believed." Thomas had initialed the blank card because I told him the fan would be restarted after an electrical repair. I intended to supervise the final test and fill in the time myself. The blue arrow showed that someone later moved the inspection into Thomas's earlier shift. Who changed it? Thomas wouldn't say. "You visited him for years and never got an answer?" He said the name mattered less than what everyone allowed the paper to become. I called that self-righteous. Marjorie's face hardened. "You still decide his tone before hearing him." I asked why she signed a ledger with her maiden name. At first, seeing Mercer upset him. And later, I was hiding the visits from you. At least she said it plainly. I asked whether she had loved him. "No." "Then what was he?" She glanced at the stack of paperbacks beside our chair. Someone I knew we had failed. The word we landed hard. Before I could ask what she meant, she said, "Go see Thomas." And this time, let him finish. Thomas lived in a supported apartment connected to the former rehabilitation program. He was 60. His right hand rested stiffly against his leg, but his voice was clear. The old man in the sea sat beside him. "You found the ledger," he said. "I found both inspection cards." "Both?" I placed them on the table. Thomas studied the carbon copy. "Marjorie told me she destroyed this. She lied to both of us." He nodded once. "That sounds familiar." Thomas said I had ordered a temporary restart after electricians replaced the relay. Production was behind. The plant manager wanted the chlorine system available before morning. I told Thomas to initial the card before leaving and said I would enter the final test time. "Why didn't you say that in front of crew?" I asked. "I was going to tell you privately." "But you didn't." "Samuel told me to wait for the union meeting." By then, management had decided the initials proved everything. Thomas also admitted he had noticed the fan belt looked worn earlier that week. He wrote it on a scrap sheet instead of the official log because replacement belts were back-ordered and he did not want the unit shut down. His brother worked that shift. Overtime was keeping the man's family afloat. Thomas had made a compromise. So had I. He delayed a proper warning. I ordered an early signature. Someone later supplied a false inspection time. The first major truth was clear. Thomas had not skipped the inspection and then lied. The record that destroyed him was misleading. Marjorie learned that within weeks. She began visiting him after his resignation, first occasionally. He had lost his health coverage, struggled with depression, and was trying to find maintenance work. She helped with applications, transportation, and paperwork. After his stroke in 2006, those visits became monthly. First Tuesday, 18 years. There had been no affair. But when I asked why she never showed me the carbon copy, Thomas said, because the first person she was protecting wasn't me. The blue arrow led me to Samuel. He was 80 and living in Cedar Rapids. When I described both forms, he said, I completed the final card. After the failure, Samuel found the incomplete card and the carbon copy in the maintenance office. He entered 1015 because that was when Thomas had initialed it. He added my blue arrow to make the record look consistent with our shift logs. I thought a complete card would prove the fan failed after testing, he said. Instead, it made Thomas look guilty. Samuel panicked. He removed the carbon copy and told Thomas not to accuse me without proof. Thomas resigned. Samuel brought the copy to Marjorie because he could not face me. Why her? She listened before deciding. I asked why he visited Thomas only once. Thomas told me not to come back. Then my own part returned clearly. Days before the failure, Thomas had said, that belt won't last a month. I answered, documented after the restart. We need the unit tonight. And on the night shift, I told him to sign before the test because I expected to finish the paperwork myself. I had not caused everything, but I created the gap where someone else's mistake could become Thomas's guilt. When I asked Marjorie why she kept the carbon copy hidden, she said, our son had just started college. Your father was living with us after his stroke. Your pension was 3 years from vesting. If the file reopened, Thomas might be cleared. I might lose my promotion, my job, or the pension our family depended on. Her first delay was supposed to be temporary, 3 years. But the ledger proved she kept the truth for 18 more. The financial explanation accounted for the beginning. It did not account for the life she built afterward. Marjorie said she planned to tell me after my pension vested. Then Thomas suffered the stroke. By then, he had rebuilt part of his life and saw her only occasionally. The stroke changed everything. She began visiting on the first Tuesday of each month. She read aloud when speech therapy exhausted him. She helped with disability forms, transportation, and ordinary tasks. Thomas became the one person with whom she could discuss the secret. I did not fall in love with him, she said, but I gave him the part of my life I was afraid to bring home. The secret began as protection and later became emotional intimacy, not romance. Still intimacy. Thomas understood her guilt. She understood his anger. Neither had to explain the past. I was excluded from an entire relationship built around damage I had helped cause. Why our anniversary? I asked. Thomas had undergone surgery that morning. The center could not reach his emergency contact because he had instructed staff not to call me. Marjorie stayed until he woke. She arrived late to our anniversary dinner and said an old school friend had been hospitalized. You chose him that day. I chose not to leave him alone. The distinction mattered. It did not erase the lie. Thomas admitted he could have contacted me after recovering. He did not. Partly from resentment, partly from fear I would reject him again, partly because Marjorie's visits had become important to him. Samuel stayed silent to protect his reputation. Marjorie stayed silent first to protect our family, then our marriage, then herself. And I had spent years teaching people that hesitation looked like guilt. That made their fear believable. It did not make their betrayal my fault. It only explained how a secret meant to last 3 years survived for more than 20. The 4 of us met in a conference room at the Historical Society. Marjorie sat beside me. Thomas sat across from us. Samuel joined by video. The visitor ledger lay open between us. Samuel said, I thought I was fixing a form. Thomas answered, You fixed me onto it. Samuel looked down. Marjorie said, I should have told Douglas before the pension vested. Before, I said, Yes. Thomas touched the ledger. I let her keep coming. You could have asked for me. I didn't want you. Then he added, Later I did. By then I didn't know how. No one had a better apology than that. I contacted the city's current water director. The old chlorine system was gone, but personnel files remained. Thomas did not want lawyers or publicity. He asked only for the incident summary to be corrected. We submitted both forms and signed statements. The revised note said responsibility could not be assigned solely to Thomas Bell because the inspection process and documentation were flawed. It was one sentence in an old file. Thomas said, "That's more honest than what was there. My promotion remained part of my career. So did the praise I received for acting decisively. Nothing could return his lost years." Marjorie and I entered counseling. I did not ask her to stop visiting Thomas. I asked her never again to make me discover a relationship in someone else's records. Trust became specific. Thomas and I exchanged numbers. We did not become friends. Sometimes we discussed a plant. Sometimes months passed without a call. The paperback stayed on our shelf. For 18 years, they had moved to my home carrying a secret in plain sight. Now I finally knew where they had gone. The Historical Society digitized the visitor ledger and placed the original in climate storage. I requested a copy of one page, not the anniversary entry. The first monthly visit after Thomas's stroke. Marjorie Lyle. 42 minutes. Paperback delivered. No special note. That was the day a temporary silence became a schedule. Last month, on the first Tuesday, Marjorie asked whether I wanted to visit Thomas with her. I almost said no. Then I asked, "Does he want me there?" She called. Thomas thought about it and said yes. We brought The Old Man and the Sea, not a new copy, one from our shelf. Thomas looked at the cover. "I already have 6. 7, Marjorie said. I sat beside the window while she read the first pages aloud. Thomas interrupted twice to complain about the old fisherman. I disagreed with him. For several minutes, the room felt ordinary. Before we left, Thomas handed me a copy of the corrected incident summary. "You should sign it," he said. "My statement is attached." Not as supervisor. At home, I placed a page on my workbench. Below the correction was a blank line labeled former operations manager. I signed my full name. Slowly. No initials. No early approval. No assumption that the record knew more than the people involved. Marjorie watched from the doorway. Does that help? A little. The paperback lies beside the signed report now. Its cover is bent. Several pages are loose. Inside, Marjorie once wrote Thomas's name, then crossed it out when he returned the book. Below it, she wrote mine. Next Tuesday, she plans to visit him again. The old visitor ledger is closed. This time, the date is written on our kitchen calendar. Beside it, in my handwriting, is one word. Together,